this is Misha, and today's video is going to be a look at the Italian Beretta BM59. We did a little video here about 2 years ago, a 6-7 minute video looking at a BM59. For those of you who watched that, I'll try to say Beretta in this video, just you know, as a little shout out to you guys. But I wanted to get a little more in depth because there's not much info out there on these guns, and they're fantastic guns. And they have a lot of interesting history. They've got a lot of the great attributes of the M1 Grand. They're made by a quality company, Beretta, and they definitely saw combat. So they've been combat tested and proven. I've spent about the last year collecting as much information as I could on the BM59, and I have a more in-depth blog article. So if you're interested after watching this video, please check that out. But I thought we would get started with the basic BM59. This is sometimes called the IDL or the Mark I. This is pretty much a standard one. Has a few differences. Now this was the one we featured in the video. I've changed a couple of things on it since then, but this is a standard PB marked example here on an Italian receiver assembled by Springfield back in the 80s. Well, in the late 40s, Italy adopted the M1 Grand and M1 Carbine. The U.S. was giving these out in large quantities. We're talking 200,000 to 250,000 to countries wanting them. So they started to replace their old Carcanos and some of their submachine guns like the MAB-38A and so on and so forth. In 1949, though, they decided that they wanted to produce their own M1 Grands in-house in Italy domestically. So they purchased the old Winchester production line from the USA. You gotta remember, at this time the US has a huge surplus of Grands. World War II's over. No one knows Korea is going to happen just a year later. So the US sells the Winchester production line to Italy. Now, as it comes to find out, then it has to open up 2 new production lines at H&R and International Harvester to meet the demands of Korea. But that's another story for the Grand video. Well, it took a little time to get M1 Grand production up and going, and the first kind of pre-production or early production examples in Italy came out in 1953. So by the mid-50s, there were 2 companies in Italy, Beretta and Beretta, making M1 Grands. Now what they would do, they would make parts, but if they had American parts from Springfield or Winchester, because they had a lot of guns, they would use those parts. So a lot of the Italian M1 Grands will be mixed with Italian and American parts. Well, in 1957, 7.62 NATO, which was the militarized version of .308, was becoming standard throughout Europe and North America. The U.S. had gone to the M14, or was about to. A lot of the Western world had adopted the FAL, and the SETME and G3 were just about to come on the scene. They weren't quite out yet, but they were getting close. So Italy looked at its options, and rather than making a whole new design, they decided to just rechamber and rework the M1 Grand to fire 7.62 NATO. They thought this will be easier, this gun works, it has a proven track record, let's do that. While they were at it, they made it magazine fed. Scratch the table. And they made it select fire, which obviously this one is not here because it's illegal semi-auto. So they basically gave the M1 Grand the same features as the M14. The prototypes were called the BM58. They went into trials in 1959. They corrected a few minor issues, and then they went into production. Now in the early days, they went through a few different things, like different placement of sling swivels, different styles of bipod, a few different flash hiders, but basically you have a converted Grand to shoot .308 7.62 NATO. They even take a lot of the same parts. Most all of your early BM59s are built using modified Grand parts, be they Italian Grand or US made. This uses the same double tilting bolt dual lug lock system. We have obviously an external op rod. This is a shorter op rod. Have Garand style adjustable rear sights. We have my neighbor next door practicing with his duck call. Honestly, I would think as much as he uses it, he would be better at it by now, but hey. Put this right here for you. Sorry, it's been a long day and I don't feel like standing anymore. We have a side sling swivel here, and this rear sling swivel actually rotates 90 degrees, so it can be used either side or bottom. This 20 round mag is made of steel, has a chromed or nickeled follower. Anyway, it's kind of an anti-friction type follower. This is probably one of the best 308 mags used by military. It's heavy duty, dependable. Now, of course, it is a little more expensive to make, and it is a little heavier, but Italian soldiers didn't tend to carry a whole selection of extra mags. They usually just had a few. That's because this gun can be topped off, and often was, by standard NATO stripper clips. Well, other features, starting from the muzzle. Now, this one has the early 5-inch compensator, flash hider compensator. It takes a modified Garand bayonet, as you can see here. Basically, the regular M1 Garand bayonet fits on. It just has to have a larger ring to go around the flash hider. The longer 7-inch would also have a grenade ring back here, but this is the earlier style. We have a short carbine link gas system. This is about a 19.4-inch barrel called the carbine barrel. As I said, it feeds from stripper clips. As you can see, it has a folding light bipod. One neat feature of the BM59 is that it has a fold-down winter trigger here. See? Nice to use if you're doing gloves. Put this back in while I've got it up. This is shorter and definitely lighter than a Garand. Still a wood and steel gun, so it's got some weight to it, but it's not too bad. We have a rubber butt pad with a trap door in it to store a takedown tool and cleaning kit. Now again, not all of these changes came into use at once. There was the Mark I, then there was the Mark 1E or Mark I modified, and so on and so forth. But this was essentially a version that was in use by the 1960s. This has all modern features except for this short 5-inch flash hider, which honestly I just put on because it's kind of neat and it makes it a little different. I think the Garand bayonet lug is very unique. But these were standard issue in Italy, well, from 1959 through the 60s, 70s, and they were still in service through the mid to late 90s. They eventually were phased out in favor of the Beretta AR-70-90, which fired 223. But it took quite a long while for the transition to happen. Italy would also export the BM59 to other nations, so it was not exclusive to Italy. In a lot of ways, a lot of people think these are an M14. They are not. They are much closer to a Garand, and an M14 is actually quite different from a Garand. So this is probably more, when people think of what an M14 is, they think it's a modified Garand. This is more what they're probably thinking of, because it really is just a modified Garand to feed from magazines. And again, the military versions were select fire. There was a selector switch on the left side of the receiver over here, and you could go from single shot to full auto. I've never shot a full auto BM59, but it has been often repeated. This is one of the most controllable 308s in full auto, thanks to the tri-compensator that the Beretta developed. But it was a very dependable gun, at least as dependable as the M1 Garand. It does have a few of the eccentricities of the Garand, of course, because it's based on it, but it's been a very fascinating gun for me. Alright, now one model that's been very common in the USA because the parts kits have been available is the BM59E or BM59 SL. These are often mixed up with the BM59 Mark 1s and other standard BM59s. What these are modified or converted M1 Garands. What Beretta would do after they launched the BM59 product line, they would offer to nations and governments and militaries to convert their old World War II Garands over to the newer, more modern pattern. And it was a pretty simple conversion process. Now, roughly speaking, a BM59E would be full auto, select fire capable, whereas the BM59 SL was generally speaking still left as a self-loading or semi-automatic rifle. However, this is not a hard and fast rule. You see both semi-only E's and full auto SLs, so it's just kind of a rule of thumb at best. What they would do, they would take the original 24-inch 30-06 barrel. They would cut a half inch off back at the chamber, converting it from a 7.62 by 63 down to a 7.62 by 51 millimeter 308, and that's why it would be a 23.5 inch barrel. This would be virtually unchanged. They would replace the standard nut on the end with this muzzle brake. It still has a Garand style bayonet lug, but you would need an opened up Garand bayonet just like you saw on that Mark 1 with the 5-inch flash hider to fit on it. Sights are unchanged. Because the barrel has been modified, the gas system is a half-inch shorter, the stock is a half-inch shorter, and the op rod, obviously because it's part of the gas system, is a half-inch shorter. That means parts for these are not really compatible with the standard BM59 Mark 1 types, and sometimes aren't even compatible with M1 Garand types. Other modifications would again be to make it full auto if necessary. This was originally a full auto. You can see there's a cutout here on the stock for their selector, and it has the same rubber butt pad as the Mark 1. They also gave it the rotating 90-degree rear sling swivel. Some 59Es and SLs had it, some didn't. This one does not have the stripper clip cutout for loading. Some did, some didn't. This does still feed from the standard 20-round BM59 box magazines, though. Now, most of these kits that are available came from Sarco, and those came from Argentina. What happened, Argentina contracted with Beretta to convert their Garands over to BM59s, and that's where these kits came from. They were originally U.S.-made guns that were converted by Beretta, and then some were used in the Falklands War, although most were issued to the Navy and never saw actual combat. But interesting story nonetheless. This particular semi-auto build using that was done by James River. They used an original kit with an original barrel, and they have an original World War II era M1 Garand Springfield receiver. So this would be pretty much exactly what Beretta would have turned out. Original receiver, a mixture of Italian and original Springfield parts. In Italy, some of these would also be used, and they called them the Typo 2 in that nation. So if you see a Type 2 or Typo 2, that is basically the converted M1 Garand to BM59 type gun like this. These are very nice guns if you just want a mag-fed Garand in 308. They really don't go for a whole lot of money. They don't have full features, of course, like the Mark 1. They don't have the winter trigger. They do have a muzzle brake, but it's not the full tri-compensator. It's just a simple, although effective, brake. No grenade sights, no bipods, so on and so forth. Mostly it's just original Garand parts. Even the cleaning kit and the buttstock is still just standard Garand. But I really like this gun. I only own one other Garand. It's an H&R, and these came up for sale, and I thought, why not? It's a good build, and really kind of rounds out my BM59 collection because it is a legitimate variant, even if it's kind of a sideline or side variant. These were actually never imported from Italy. You will see starting back in the 60s, 1964 if memory serves, Golden State started doing quote-unquote BM59s or M59s. Some even had the license by Beretta stamp on the receiver, but these were M1 Grand conversions. Many other companies also did quote-unquote M59 or BM59 conversions back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. You have to be very careful because some were on welded receivers, or I should say re-welded receivers. Some were not. Some were just on standard modified Grand receivers, but most of them are using chunked demilled M1 Grands. They would, most of them, feed from standard BM59 magazines, but that was really about the only Italian part in them. They used unique mag catches. They didn't use the same parts as the Italian guns, which means if a part breaks on some of those, finding a replacement, you basically have to fabricate one. A lot of times these will not have the muzzle brakes and they won't have the rubber butt pads, so that's a good way to tell at a glance. So if you see a Golden State gun that looks similar to this, just know that it was a US made assembly, almost like a kit gun, even if it says licensed by Beretta on the side, which not all of them do, only some do. But just, if you see one of those, just know what you're getting into. I'm not saying they're necessarily bad guns, but just know, like this one, James River is a good company, and it's not a re-welded receiver, so I trust it. And it's just a plinker for fun. But in no way are BM59s that look like this pretty bad or anything like that. This uses almost a standard op rod. It's just 1 inch shorter, as I said. So this is actually the longest BM59. But it actually still fits in M1 Grand cases and stuff, which is nice. Really nice trigger on this one, too. Alright, we'll move on. We looked at the BM59 Mark 1 and the BM59E or SL. Now we're moving on to other variants. Well, the BM59 Mark 2 was very much like the Mark 1, except it had a pistol grip. And we're going to get back, we're going to revisit that in just a second here. But after that was the BM59 Mark 3, which was a folding stock version, which is what I have here. Goes around. This came in 2 basic versions. You had the BM59 Mark III Alpine Troop, which was the same up front. It had the same 19.3 inch barrel as the Mark I with fixed either 5 inch or 7 inch compensator. But then you have the stock here with a Bakelite pistol grip, and it has the folding metal stock. Now, this is this here. This that you just squeeze, and then this, like that. And then you have a button here, and that folds over, and that is your folded stock. Folds completely up. This is an original Italian. That would be the Alpine. The BM59 Mark III Paratrooper added one extra way of reducing length. Just right on camera here. The 7 inch compensator grenade launcher comes off, quick detach. Underneath it, we have a slightly shorter 18.4 inch barrel. As you see, it doesn't stick out very far from the sight base. On a standard rifle, the sight base would be in the same location with the gas port in the same location, but it would stick out an extra inch this far into the compensator. This is a 7 inch. It's the same as the fixed one, except it quick detaches. It does have a grenade ring here, muzzle brake here, flash hider here. This is the more modern bayonet lug, and I'll show you a bayonet that'll fit it in just a little bit. Kind of M16 style, but it is not interchangeable with M16 marks. M7 or M9 bayonets. It's just a little bit different. Actually, it looks like they use modified carbine M1 carbine bayonets on them. Yeah, they would compact these up as you see it here. Jump with them, quite short really. And then once they get on the ground with the paratrooper, they would lock that on, unfold the stock, just bring this down here, bring this down, there you go, and you're ready to go. Now this is, like I said, an original Italian stock. These were used by the Italian military as well as some others. They usually did have the bipod, and the best I could tell, they did have the fold-up grenade sights. That also acts as a gas cutoff. Flipping this back around, because there's also this knob here, which can mount what they call an indirect grenade sight, which is what was on the original M1 Garand, so you can put an old style M1 Garand grenade sight here. Well, to get back to semi-autos, and this is a good one to start with, in the early 60s, a few true BM59s came over before the 1968 cutoff of importing machine guns or machine gun type, convertible full auto type guns. I've seen estimates of about 200. I don't know. I can't find any real data on how these came over, who brought them over. This is kind of before importing had to be marked, and they could still bring over select fire guns, so I don't know. But there are some pre-1968 BM59s that came into the country. The first semi-autos came in through Beretta, which was originally a Gold Rush store. It was a shop over in California. But Beretta would, Mr. Edwards was the owner, and in 1967, thereabouts, he would get, a few pre-production models from Italy that were exactly like the then current Mark I BM59, except semi-only. So he placed an order for more. He received his actual batch of between 120 and 150 guns, named BM59 in 1969, or maybe late 1968. It's again a little unclear. But these, unfortunately, weren't exactly like the pre-production. They lacked the grenade sight, and they had a commercial-style butt pad made of brown plastic. Well, Mr. Edwards wasn't fond of this. There were several emails floating around the internet how he was displeased with Beretta. He made some very controversial accusations. Anyway, their partnership fell apart. So after only 120 to 150 guns came in through Beretta, known as BM69, that relationship fell apart. The reason I bring that up now, this is actually one of the pre-import samples that was brought in. This is a semi-only, but it was imported in 1967, early 68, and when it came in, it had that 5-inch compensator you saw on the other gun. I just took it off and put the quick detach because it looks neat. But other than that, it's pretty much how you see it. But I thought that was neat that this one did come in with the 18.4-inch barrel. It would be neat to make it into a paratrooper. That's what's kind of fun about these BM59s. You can reconfigure them very easily. The grenade sights, the bipod are all in this gas cylinder that just pulls off like on a Garand. This just unscrews with a nut up here for, so you can swap out muzzle devices. Stocks come off exactly like on an M1 Garand. These are kind of early Lego guns. You could really reconfigure them. I could make this into a Mark I or a Mark II or a Mark IV. Well, okay, not a Mark IV, but I can make it into a Mark I or a Mark II very easily by just putting a different stock on it, which is kind of nice. But yeah, this came from a friend, from a longtime collector, and it's a very neat gun. It's all original. What's interesting too is this is when Beretta did this one, they used a converted Springfield receiver. This is a PB marking up here. This is original, but it is a converted receiver that Italy used. Like I said, they were using a lot of original American parts back in the 60s. I've seen a number that as much as 75% of the BM59 inventory of the Italian military was on original U.S. receivers, but I have no way to verify or prove that. But it's definitely a case that a lot of authentic BMs did that. So yeah, this obviously doesn't have a storage compartment in the buttstock, so there's a smaller one here in the pistol grip. You need a little bullet tip just to slide this floor plate off, and then you're good to go. It also has a winter trigger, but it is modified to work with the pistol grip, which is kind of neat. It's bent at a different angle. It still feeds from standard mags, of course. And it has a rubber butt pad on it. This is it right here. This little rubber bumper is what you get. Otherwise, metal. Fun, huh? But yeah, this was the Mark III Paratrooper. But we'd share this. It's a really neat gun and very appreciative to have it. I always thought having a BM59 Para is interesting, and it being a early Beretta import is even more interesting-er. Well, after Bennett's relationship with Beretta fell apart, the only BM59s you could get were those US-made inspirations. I don't even call them copies. But in the late 70s, a company called Bourbon Co., something like that. But anyway, Bourbon began to import what was called the BM62 in the late 70s, running through the very early 80s. Now, the BM62 was a highly sporterized version. It was the sporter version of the BM59 that Beretta was doing for the European market. The BM69 before it did not have the grenade sights, but still did have the slot in the gas tube for the bipod. The bipod could have been added for an extra $20. It was a factory upgrade. But the BM62s pretty much lacked all your military features. The BM62 would have basically a fake flash hider. It was just a cylinder that came out here 5 inches long. No bayonet lug. No grenade sight. No bipod or a way to attach one. It did not have the winter trigger. It could not be topped off by stripper clips. And it came with a very nice but very commercial type stock. It had grasping grooves up here. It was made of commercial grade walnut. And it had early ones had the same brown plastic butt pad as the BM69s. Later ones had a softer black rubber butt pad. No one knows exactly how many BM62s came in, but the numbers range from 1,500 to 2,000. So significantly more than the BM59s, but still a very small number. If you own a BM62, you own a very rare overall weapon. It's very well made. It's all Italian, all Beretta, and just because they are sporterized, for that market. It wasn't an import thing. They were just trying to appeal to the market at the time, and the military guns weren't that hot. But they were extremely well made with well done receivers, original correct barrels, so on and so forth. And they did feed from the 20-round mags, although they did come with 5 or 10 rounders as well. So they even sold them with sporting type magazines, but you could buy 20-round higher capacities. But that lasted until about 1981, and then Bourbon got out of the game, and that was pretty much it for the authentic Italian imports. So you've got the small number of BM69s and the small number of BM62s. So somewhere between 2,000 and 2,200 real Italian guns came in during those decades. That was pretty much it. At the same time as military, they were still very much in use, although by the 80s the Italian military had as many as they needed. They pretty much issued the Mark I and the Mark III, but they had a few of the Mark IIs and the Mark IVs as well. But mostly it was just the Mark I and the Mark III and the Italians. Other nations would use them as well, including Indonesia, who would even actually license produce it for a time. Algeria, Ethiopia, I've got, like I said, Argentina would use a version, and so on and so forth. So these were seeing moderate use, but they were seeing use on virtually every continent, especially in Africa, South America, and East Asia. So they definitely saw a lot of the tropical use. Alright, we'll move on. And for our final rifle today, we have the BM59 Mark IV, often called the Nigerian, and sometimes called the LMG version or the squad automatic support weapon version. This is an odd gun, and I'm still researching it. There's a lot of questions I have about the Mark IV, and there's not much in the Beretta literature, and there's really not much you can find anywhere else. This was definitely a version they made. But how and why, I have my questions. It's based on the same stock as the Mark II. It's just a wooden stock with a polymer pistol grip. All this back here is the same. The only difference, we have a flip-up butt pad, if you can see the hinge here. This just folds up to give a shoulder rest, kind of like on an M1A, M14, which is nice. It's actually quite useful in this stock. Otherwise, it's pretty much all the same. You come up here, and we have a 20-inch, well, how do I say this? 20.8 inch, nearly 21 inch, but not quite, 20.8 inch barrel. Now this is often called a heavy barrel, sort of. It is longer, which obviously does make it technically heavier. Where it's really thicker though, out here it's the same diameter. Under the handguard though, it doesn't have any fluting or lightning cuts like most Garand barrels. And therefore it takes a different upper handguard, which has more relief under it, so it'll accommodate the thicker barrel. So it is heavier from here to here, basically, but not by a huge amount. But then again, this is already a pretty thick barrel, so how much more do you need to make it heavy? Really just where it goes into the receiver, it's heavier and thicker. Now, it still has the same typical grenade sights we're used to now. It has a unique op rod. It's almost as long as the one used in the Typo 2 or BM59E, but it's just maybe a 1/4 inch shorter. So it has its own little special op rod. It's a little longer. It takes a standard bayonet, later style, M16 style, I guess you want to call that, although it's not compatible. And I've seen these with both the 5-inch, and this one here has the 7-inch compensator on them. So it seems like they did them both ways. It has all the other pretty standard features. We've got a fold-down winter trigger again. Da-da-da-da. It can be topped off by stripper clips, and it feeds from the standard 20-round mag. Now, it still has the rotating rear sling swivel. Just because I wanted to, I moved the front sling swivel to the bottom position. It still has the side position as well. On any of these, except for the BM59E, you can locate your front swivel on either the side or the bottom. I just put it on the bottom because I wanted to. Also, the storage compartment's a little different on this one. It's a little more wide open. It can hold a little more. I don't know if they issued more to the guys issued these, or it may just be because of how the stock is cut out differently. But the cutout is a little different. It still takes the same cleaning kit and BM59 tool. So that's this gun. It's definitely a cool gun. I mean, the BM59 Nigerians, as they're often called, are very neat. I mean, it's pretty long, pretty heavy, but no recoil. Where the whole Nigerian came from. In 1969, that nation ordered the BM59 Mark II. And they were sent the Mark II. Now, if you remember, the Mark II is just like the Mark I with the 19.3-inch barrel, but it has this style of stock with the pistol grip. This stock was adapted to help people shoot the gun in full auto easier, which it does because of not just the pistol grip, but also the shoulder rest and just the angles. It's a sharper angle. It's very analogous to the M14A1 or M14E2 type stock, really. So they ordered those, but they also received these Mark IVs, and they would have the longer barrel. And that's really the difference between the Mark I and the Mark II and the Mark IV is this longer, slightly heavier barrel. That's really all I can tell. It doesn't seem like Nigeria ordered these, but Beretta sent them to him anyway. Now, what is odd about these to me is this barrel is very similar. It is different, but it's a very similar barrel to that used in the BM59E. And they not only made converted M1 Grand barrels with BM59Es, they also made some that were made in Italy, purpose-built as BM59E Type 02 barrels in the 60s. I have to wonder if they had some leftover barrel blanks, and they had some Mark II stocks, and they kind of put them together and made the Mark IV. I have to wonder this, and I haven't seen any evidence otherwise, but the barrels are very similar. These are just just a hair thicker under the handguard than the E's, but the E is thicker, at least the Italian-made E barrels are thicker than the Mark I, Mark II, Mark III's. So I don't know, and again, these are a little shorter than the E's, that's why I said barrel blanks, not complete barrels, obviously. I'd love to know more exactly the history. You see a lot of the same stuff repeated over and over about the Mark IV, but it seems to be just kind of folklore, common wisdom, with not a whole lot to back it up aside from what came from Springfield and Bob Reese. And that brings us to that. After bourbon got out of the game, Mr. Bob Reese, then of Springfield Armory, in the late 70s, purchased literally tons of BM59 parts, accessories, even receivers, barrels, everything. By that point, the late 70s, even though the gun was still very much in frontline Italian service, Beretta was wrapping up production because the military had more than enough to meet its needs, and all the overseas customers had been satisfied. So they were looking to get rid of the parts. Plus, they had a bunch of leftover semi-auto parts from the BM59 and BM62 contracts that they wanted to get rid of. Now, as most of you know, the original Springfield Armory, the U.S.-owned one, closed in 1968. Well, the Reese family bought the name and moved to Illinois, and then you have Bob Reese. So starting as early as 1981, Springfield Armory started offering the BM59, and they offered pretty much every version you've seen here on this video today. They had the standard version, they had a para version, they had this Nigerian version, they even had some of the BM59E types, they even had some BM69 and BM62 types that they were building with leftover parts. So they made a lot, and then if you look at their catalogs and flyers from 81 through the mid-80s and even late 80s, they have a lot of different configurations because they're building with whatever parts they received from Italy. They were all assembled here in the USA, but they were assembled using original Italian-made receivers. Now, on the Mark I you first saw in this video, it had a PB marked receiver. So when it came in, it was already roll marked by Beretta. This one here, if you see, is just roll marked Springfield. That does not mean it's a cast receiver or anything like that. This receiver was not made in the U.S. This came over from Italy. It just had not been roll marked in Italy. It was still, all these receivers were in various stages of completion. None of them were 100% receivers, otherwise they couldn't have brought them over as easy as they did. So whenever this particular one, as long as several others like it, came over, it was finished out, but it didn't have the roll markings on it as much and probably needed some other machining done to make it complete. So some of these Springfield guns were like that, including this one. It still has the stripper clip guide and all that. The barrel's Italian, so on and so forth. So the BM59s that Springfield sold, even though they were assembled here, were very good guns because they were Italian. And very, very next to, well, in a lot of ways, they're the most authentic guns available because, again, they had all the military features: flash hider, bayonet lug, grenade sights, bipod, pistol grip, sometimes folding stock, whereas the 69s and the 62s lack some or all of those features. So if you're just wanting a gun that looks like an Italian military and acts like an Italian military gun, really the Springfield's the way to go. Again, they did a lot of versions of these. They sold between 3,000 and 4,000 all told over about a 10-year production run. In 1992, Springfield Armory declared bankruptcy, and much of its assets, including the BM59 production line and parts, were transferred to Reese, which was Bob Reese. He had a separate company at that point. So Reese, as a company, would continue selling the BM59 series through at least 2005. I think some of the last documented cases of new guns coming from Reese were about 2005, maybe 2003. You know, late assault weapons bin era to just right after. After that, they were out of guns, but they continued to sell parts until they closed their doors around 2010. Again, I might be off by a year or two there, but you know, up until 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago, they were still selling some BM59 parts. From what I understand, Mr. Tim Shufflin bought whatever parts they had left over, but it wasn't much. By that point, they had been doing BM59 stuff for nearly 30 years. Most of their parts, all of their receivers were gone. So that kind of gives you the breakdown of semi-autos. I think very highly of the Springfield guns. I think very highly of Springfield. They've imported a lot of guns. They have really pleasant customer service. I think very highly of the BM59, therefore I like the combination of the two. But this is the so-called Mark IV Nigerian. As I learn more info, I'll be happy to share it, but that's what I've been able to learn so far about it. They existed, but it might have been something that Beretta kind of tossed together in the 70s to use up some parts, and it is a neat gun, and it's probably more effective in full auto because of the longer, slightly heavier barrel. Adding up all the semi-autos from the different makers, not counting things like Golden State, which didn't make real BM59s, but all the true BM59 types, not counting the E's and the SL builds either, but the real ones, I get a number of somewhere between 4,800 and 6,300 in the USA. That's the total number of BM59s and variants like it that are semi-auto, civilian legal, that are in the United States today. Again, not counting modern kit builds. Those guns would all be on Italian receivers. But I wanted just to share with you what I've learned about these guns because I've been really interested in them for a long time. In a lot of ways, these kind of appeal to me more than the M1A, M14, and even the M1 Grand. Got a couple of accessories to show you why not. This is a Italian BM59 mag pouch. It holds 2 mags. And what this is a British M37 pouch that Italy slightly modified to work with the BM59. You'll see that a lot. A lot of the web gear that Italy used was repurposed from other nations, even World War II. Even the slings on these are basically M1 Grand slings. They did make their own that are a little different. They have these little rivets in them, but basically they're M1 Grand slings. And these are the pouches. These came from Sportsman's Guide. They're actually in really great shape, and they sell them in sets of 2. So 2 pouches with 2 mags each you can put in them. They don't come with the mags, I didn't mean to say that, but the idea. Here is a BM59 later style bayonet. To me, it seems like they took an M1 carbine bayonet and they replaced the with one with a larger ring to fit around the flash hider. Kind of interesting. We've seen some of these that are dated 1958, 1959 too, so kind of puts some evidence to that. You don't know. And just to show you, back to talking about Springfield and Reese, this is an original pistol grip on here. It originally came with this. This is a wooden grip made by, I believe it was Wagner's, something with a W, sorry, I don't have notes in front of me to remember all this, but it was made for Springfield to put on their paratroopers and their Nigerians because they did not have many at all of the original Bakelite type grips. So if you see this on a gun, it's probably original as it shipped from Springfield, but it's not original Italian. I went to the Bakelite grip because it's a little bit smaller and it fits my hands better. Plus you get the small storage compartment for small things. I like keeping like a takedown tool and things, little patches and things in here, a sight tool, whatever you might need. But there's that. Also, before we go, talking about the paratroopers again, after they ran out of original paratrooper stocks, Reese would make his own, or I should say Springfield or Reese. And you can tell these from originals because they don't have that folding strut and the folding butt plate. They just fold over to the right side. They don't have the additional 2 folds. So if you see a fixed tubular stock, again, it might have been what came with the gun back in the 80s or 90s, but it is an original Italian. I'm not speaking one way or the other to them. I do know collectors obviously prefer the Italian folding stock for good reason, just to be authentic. Well, I wanted to share a rifle series I really enjoyed today, and I appreciate you tuning in. I'd love to talk more about the BM59 in the comments, so let's chat about it. And as always, this is Misha, and thanks for tuning in.